Imagine waking up tomorrow and everything you know, your home, your career, your very name, is gone. In 605 BC, the vibrant, deeply spiritual city of Jerusalem fell to an unstoppable force. A young man named Daniel was dragged from the ruins and marched straight into the glittering, ruthless heart of Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. His world was erased overnight. This wasn't just a military defeat, it was a calculated, psychological re-education camp. Babylon didn't just want physical captives, they wanted the minds of the elite youth. They stripped Daniel of his freedom, yes, but then they went much deeper. They stripped him of his Hebrew name, a name that literally meant, "God is my judge," and forced a pagan Babylonian name upon him, Belshazzar. The goal was total identity erasure, a complete neurobiological reset designed to make him forget his God, his people, and his heritage. It is a terrifying reality, to look in the mirror and not recognize the life staring back at you. That is why this ancient history feels so hauntingly modern. Babylon is not just dust and ruins, it is a system. It is any culture, any toxic workplace, or any sudden tragedy that tries to overwrite who you fundamentally are. Have you ever had your life turned upside down in an instant, leaving you entirely isolated and wondering who you really are? How did you survive that first night in your own personal Babylon? They can change your zip code. They can change your job title. They can even change what people call you. But there is a line they cannot cross unless you voluntarily hand them the pen. Daniel realized early on that while his physical geography had radically shifted, his spiritual geography remained completely untouched. He possessed an internal fortress that Nebuchadnezzar's sprawling golden empire could never breach. But before Daniel could even process the trauma of his stolen identity, he was slammed with a covert, deadly test, one where a single bite of food could cost him his destiny. Part 2. It's the one tiny compromise that destroys your destiny. You tell yourself it's just this once, but Babylon knows exactly how human psychology works. If it can capture your daily habits, it entirely owns your future. This brings us to the suffocating pressure of the king's table. When Daniel was presented with the royal Babylonian delicacies, this was not a debate about modern dietary preferences or a health food initiative. It was a severe test of covenantal fidelity. The meat on that table was systematically sacrificed to Babylonian gods. To eat it was to sign a legally binding spiritual contract of allegiance. It meant accepting the king as your ultimate provider instead of God. Put yourself in that sprawling, opulent dining hall. The room is deafeningly loud. The smell of roasted meat and rich wine is intoxicating. Everyone else is eating, laughing, blending in. The sheer psychological agony of being the only teenager sitting at that massive table with an empty plate is crushing. The urge to simply fit in, to avoid drawing the dangerous gaze of the guards, screams at your nervous system. Look around your life right now. What is the king's food in your environment? What small, seemingly harmless compromise is your workplace, your friend group, or your culture demanding you swallow today just to fit in? Would you have the courage to politely push the plate away? It takes monumental courage to draw a boundary when everyone else is blurring the lines. Daniel respectfully requested vegetables and water. It was a massive risk that could have been instantly interpreted as a fatal royal insult. Yet God honors those who honor him. 10 days later, Daniel and his 3 friends were visibly healthier and sharper than the rest of the assimilated youth. The psychological warfare failed. Daniel drew his line in the sand and survived the table. But the real danger wasn't the food. It was the sudden, terrifying decree from a paranoid king that would instantly put a bounty on Daniel's head. Part 3. The clock is ticking, and the most powerful CEO on earth has just ordered the execution of every smart person in the city, all because of a nightmare he can't even remember. Welcome to the absolute, toxic madness of absolute power. King Nebuchadnezzar wakes up drenched in a cold sweat. The terror of his dream lingers, but the details are entirely gone. So he demands the impossible from his royal advisors. Tell me the dream and the interpretation. It is an unprecedented data retrieval task. When the advisors inevitably fail, the king's fragile ego completely fractures. The decree goes out: total liquidation of the wise men. Panic immediately floods the ancient streets of Babylon. Hear the heavy, chaotic thud of the executioner's leather boots echoing down the cold marble hallway. They are coming for Daniel. The tension is thick enough to choke on. But here is the nuance that changes everything. Contrast the manic, sleepless paranoia of the most powerful man on the planet with the deep neurological peace of a Hebrew captive. When Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, arrives to arrest him, Daniel doesn't panic. He doesn't beg for mercy. He responds with profound, terrifying calmness. You do not have to absorb the chaos of your environment. While the entire city is drowning in existential dread, Daniel retreats. He steps into the absolute, unearthly silence of his prayer room. He gathers his 3 friends, and they seek the mercy of the God of heaven. They don't stage a protest. They wage an invisible war on their knees. And in the dead of night, the mystery is sovereignly revealed. The tension breaks, giving way to profound awe. Daniel blesses God, recognizing that human empires are fragile, but God's wisdom is infinite. Daniel walks straight into the throne room, facing the man who holds his life in his hands, and opens his mouth to reveal a secret no human mind could possibly know. Part 4. Picture a 90-foot statue of solid gold towering over the plain of Dura. Now listen to the overwhelming, deafening roar of a massive symphony. The rule is simple. When the music plays, you bow or you burn. This is the ultimate loyalty oath. Geopolitically, King Nebuchadnezzar is not just putting on an extravagant, egotistical show. He is ruthlessly unifying a highly fractured empire. He is demanding absolute synchronization from every leader, magistrate, and governor across his vast territory. Spiritually, he is demanding total, uncompromised worship. He wants to own their souls, not just their taxes. Feel the immense physical tension radiating across that dusty plain. The musicians raise their instruments, the horn sounds. The heavy gravitational pull of the crowd is impossible to ignore. Imagine the sound of thousands of people dropping to the dirt in perfect unison. Hear the rustle of their expensive garments hitting the sand. The pressure to conform is a physical weight pressing down on your shoulders. You can feel the trembling in your legs. You can feel the cold sweat breaking out on your brow. The adrenaline is spiking so hard it makes your vision blur. Because faith isn't the romanticized absence of fear. Faith is feeling absolutely terrified, yet choosing to stand completely upright when the entire world around you is sinking to its knees. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego felt that paralyzing fear. They knew exactly what the fiery furnace looked like. They knew the political and agonizing physical consequences of defying the most volatile man alive. But there is a line they simply will not cross. The music suddenly cuts out. The dust settles over the thousands of bowing bodies, blanketing the plain in a bizarre, breathless silence. And there, starkly visible against the flat, golden horizon, 3 solitary silhouettes remain standing. There is no place to hide in a crowd of cowards. Treason has a price, and as the king's face twists into a mask of pure rage, he gives the order to crank the heat to an unimaginable, fatal extreme. Part 5. The furnace is roaring. It's not just a fire, it's a hyper-pressurized inferno. The heat is so intensely violent that the sudden thermal shock kills the heavily armored guards instantly. The physical environment is pure, localized destruction. 7 times hotter than normal, the air itself shimmers and warps dangerously around the brick opening. But right before this lethal execution, something profoundly earth-shattering happens. It is a moment that redefines the very nature of human trust. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do not beg for their lives. They do not attempt to negotiate a political compromise. They look the most powerful, furious man on earth dead in the eye and deliver the hardest sentence in the human language. "Our God is able to save us," they declare, their voices cutting through the oppressive roar of the flames. "But even if he does not, we will not bow." This changes everything. It is the ultimate release of control. It is a terrifying, beautiful surrender. They entirely decouple their obedience from their survival. They are not serving God because he guarantees their immediate physical safety. They are serving him simply because he is God. Let that sink into your own current reality. Think about your deepest unanswered prayer. Think about the diagnosis, the financial ruin, or the broken relationship you are desperately begging heaven to fix. Could you look at the greatest trial in your life right now, the thing you are begging God to resolve, and say, "Even if he doesn't, I will remain entirely faithful"? It is a staggering level of spiritual maturity. Without hesitation, they are shoved into the blinding, white-hot center. The king leans forward on his throne, his eyes wide, expecting the immediate, tragic finality of ash. The crackle of the fire is deafening, yet strangely, there are no screams of agony. The expected scent of destruction is entirely absent. But as Nebuchadnezzar squints into the blinding, consuming light, his breath catches in his throat. Because he doesn't see 3 men burning, he sees 4 men walking. Part 6. 1 second, the CEO of the world is pacing the roof of his penthouse, bragging about his self-made empire. The next second, he is completely stripped of his sanity, eating grass in a damp field like an animal. This is the steep, terrifying drop-off of human pride. King Nebuchadnezzar stood on the grand balcony of his legendary palace, looking out over the magnificent hanging gardens and the sprawling metropolis of Babylon. He took a deep, satisfied breath and absorbed all the glory. "Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power?" The arrogant words had barely left his lips before a voice from heaven shattered his delusion. His mind instantly, violently snapped. This is historically and medically recognizable as boanthropy, a severe, rare psychiatric collapse where a human being fundamentally believes they are a bovine. The most feared monarch in human history lost his ability to reason, to speak, to rule. He was driven away from human society. But here is the profound twist you must understand. This horrific humiliation was not merely a cosmic punishment. It was a severe, targeted mercy. God had to lock Nebuchadnezzar inside a dark, neurological prison to break his lethal ego and ultimately save his soul. Pride is a deceptive, silent poison. It makes us think we are untouchable gods, but in reality it actually turns us into irrational beasts. It isolates us. It strips away our true humanity. Imagine the sheer vertigo of that absolute fall from grace. Picture the sudden, awkward silence of the royal palace after the king is quietly exiled to the dirt, drenched in the cold dew of heaven, his hair growing as long as eagle's feathers, his nails thick and sharp like bird's claws. He is completely helpless, a prisoner in his own fractured mind. 12 months of divine warning meant absolutely nothing, and now the consequences have violently arrived. Nebuchadnezzar's sanity eventually returns, but his empire's days are secretly numbered, leading to a sudden, violent shift of power while the world is busy partying. Part 7. It is the ultimate frat party crashed by a ghost. King Belshazzar is drinking wine from sacred, stolen cups, untouchable behind massive walls, until disembodied fingers suddenly appear out of thin air and begin carving into the plaster. Welcome to the devastating, intoxicating illusion of ultimate security. The year is 539 BC, and Babylon fundamentally believes it is completely invincible. The sprawling city walls are incomprehensibly thick. The granaries are packed with years of supplies. To prove just how untouchable he is, Belshazzar commits a fatal, extraordinarily arrogant error. He orders the sacred golden vessels, stolen from the Holy Temple in Jerusalem decades ago by his predecessor, to be brought to his drunken, chaotic feast. He is actively mocking the God of Israel. He is raising a toast to his own permanent supremacy and the unshakable power of his empire. But human systems, economies, and towering political regimes are incredibly fragile. They always feel intensely permanent right up until the exact second they completely collapse. While the Babylonian elite drink and laugh, assuming their military defenses are completely fail-safe, a staggering military operation is quietly unfolding in the dark. The Medo-Persian army, commanded by Cyrus the Great, is not trying to batter down the impregnable bronze doors. Instead, they are silently, methodically diverting the massive Euphrates River that flows directly through the center of the city. They are lowering the water level to march right underneath the massive defenses. Babylon is falling, and its arrogant leaders are too busy partying to even notice the water rapidly receding outside their fortress. The music stops, the laughter chokes. The dead, suffocating silence that falls over 1,000 lords as the king's knees literally knock together in sheer psychological terror. The disembodied hand writes a cryptic, terrifying message of total doom right over the lampstand, illuminating the judgment for the entire paralyzed room to see. The psychological weight in that hall is instantly crushing. The most powerful man in the room is reduced to a trembling, terrified ghost of a leader. He realizes in a fraction of a second that all his wealth, all his towering walls, and all his perceived power mean absolutely nothing. He has wasted his time, his authority, and his life playing a foolish game. He was weighed in the balances and found wanting. And before the sun could rise on his panic, a new, ruthless regime would violently claim the throne. Part 8. Imagine being 80 years old, doing your job with flawless, unmatched integrity, and becoming the target of the most vicious, coordinated character assassination in corporate history. Daniel had miraculously survived the brutal, volatile reign of Nebuchadnezzar. He had outlasted the arrogant, sudden collapse of Belshazzar. Now, under the brand new Medo-Persian regime of King Darius, he is still standing, still serving, and still vastly outperforming everyone else in the room. His administrative brilliance and spotless track record earned him the highest promotion in the entire empire. And that is exactly when the vicious whispers start echoing in the dark halls of power. You see, excellence always breeds deep resentment in the hearts of the corrupt. The other powerful satraps and administrators simply cannot stand him. They launch a massive, frantic investigation to find dirt on this aging Hebrew exile. But they find absolutely nothing. No financial embezzlement, no moral scandals, no compromised loyalties, no hidden political agendas. So they realize the only way to destroy him is to completely weaponize his own faithfulness. They manipulate King Darius's fragile royal ego into signing a legally flawless trap. For 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or man except the king will be violently executed. This is the infamous law of the Medes and Persians, an immutable constitutional mechanism that not even the king himself can reverse once it is stamped into wax. The trap suddenly snaps shut. It is the ultimate toxic workplace conspiracy designed to guarantee a fatal outcome. Daniel knows the document is signed. He knows it is a literal death sentence. Yet he goes home, leaves the windows wide open, and does exactly what he has done every single day. He does not hire a crisis PR team to control the narrative. He does not send frantic, defensive messages to the king, begging for an exception. He doesn't even bother to close his shutters to hide his devotion. He simply walks up to his upper room, faces Jerusalem, drops to his aged, tired knees, and prays. The sheer, overwhelming power of this moment is its absolute quietness. In a modern world completely obsessed with fiercely defending its reputation and fighting back against every single slight, Daniel just kneels in the sunlit silence. He places his reputation, his vast career, and his very oxygen entirely in the hands of God. He doesn't fight back when the heavy footsteps arrive at his door, arresting him and dragging him toward a sensory deprivation chamber designed for execution. Part 9. Listen to the heavy, brutal scrape of the massive stone sliding across the opening, sealing the den. Plunged into pitch blackness, the air is thick, and all you can hear is the heavy, hungry breathing of apex predators. There is no political escape. The royal seal is pressed firmly into the wax on the stone, legally finalizing the terrifying doom of an innocent man. But inside this dark, underground cavern, we are about to witness the ultimate, mind-bending juxtaposition of true, unshakable peace. Look carefully at the surface level above the pit. King Darius is the most powerful human being on the planet. He has the luxury palace, the soft silk sheets, the royal musicians, and the sprawling military guarding his door. Yet he angrily dismisses the entertainment. He flatly refuses his luxurious food. He spends the entire night agonizingly pacing the cold marble floors, sweating, utterly trapped by his own disastrous political mistake. He is suffering from agonizing insomnia, crushed beneath the weight of his guilt. Now look beneath the ground. The condemned 80-year-old man is sitting in the damp, cold dirt, entirely surrounded by lethal, starving predators, and he is resting completely undisturbed. The massive lions are pacing, but their jaws are miraculously held shut by an invisible, divine force. The profound theological reality here is that true peace is completely internal, not environmental. We spend so much of our frantic lives begging God to drastically change our environment, to quickly get us out of the suffocating darkness, to remove the severe threats from our proximity. But God doesn't always keep us out of the den. Sometimes He allows the heavy stone to be rolled over the mouth of our cave. Sometimes He just firmly shuts the lions' mouths while we are forced to stand right next to them. The agonizingly slow, silent passage of the night. Every hour is torture for the king, waiting for the gruesome, inevitable. For Darius, the silence of the night is deafening, filled with the horrifying imagination of what those beasts are violently doing to his most trusted advisor. But for Daniel, the silence is a heavy blanket of deep, neurobiological rest. He is not fighting the lions. He is trusting the sovereign God who created them. He is safely, deeply asleep in the absolute epicenter of danger. At the first break of dawn, the king sprints to the pit, his voice cracking as he calls out into the darkness, terrified of the silence that might answer back. Part 10. You pray, you wait, and you hear absolutely nothing. It feels like God is ignoring you. But what if the delay isn't a denial? What if you are caught in the crossfire of an invisible, cosmic war? Welcome to the matrix moment of Daniel chapter 10. The thick, comfortable curtain of human reality is suddenly, violently pulled back. Daniel is an old, exhausted man now, and he is deeply burdened by a terrifying vision regarding the grim future of his people. So he does what he has always done. He humbles himself completely. He begins a severe, agonizing fast. No meat, no wine, no pleasant bread touches his lips. For 21 excruciating days, he waits for a clear answer from heaven. And for 21 days, he gets absolutely nothing but deafening, painful silence. This text validates every single moment of profound spiritual fatigue you have ever felt. The sheer exhaustion of waiting for a breakthrough that stubbornly refuses to arrive can break a human mind. But the answer finally comes, and the explanation is entirely mind-bending. A glowing, terrifying, angelic being finally breaks through to Daniel, explaining the long delay. The angel wasn't ignoring him. The very first day Daniel started praying, The answer was immediately dispatched from the throne room, but it was violently intercepted in the spiritual realm. This introduces the profound, unsettling concept of cosmic geography. The angel was aggressively opposed by a dark, powerful, territorial entity known as the Prince of Persia. The sudden friction of the spiritual realm breaking into the physical. Daniel collapses, completely drained of strength, unable to breathe as the veil is pulled back. Your unanswered prayer is not forgotten. It is violently contested. There is a brutal, unseen war raging right now over your destiny, your family, and your specific calling. We so often mistake the heavy friction of spiritual warfare for the cold absence of God. We think God has completely abandoned us, when in reality, heaven is actively fighting through hostile, dark territory to bring the ultimate resolution to our doorstep. Daniel's physical body gives out under the sheer, crushing weight of this supernatural revelation. His face falls heavily to the dirt. He is completely mute and paralyzed by the glory. And as the angel finally touches him to restore his strength, he unlocks terrifying, mind-bending visions of the future that will make the old prophet physically sick. Part 11. Look at the news today. The geopolitical chaos, the wars, the collapsing economies. It feels like the world is spinning violently out of control. But what if all of this was already mapped out in an ancient script? When we look at the unstable future, our nervous systems immediately flood with panic. We see leaders making erratic decisions, international borders shifting overnight, and entire cultural foundations cracking under immense pressure. But when you step into the prophetic chapters of Daniel, a staggering paradigm shift washes over you. God is not up in heaven, nervously pacing the floor, reacting to the latest breaking news notification on our screens. He holds the blueprint. Daniel stands on the edge of the spiritual realm and watches human empires rising and falling like grotesque, massive beasts emerging from a churning, violent sea. He sees the lion with eagle's wings. He sees the heavy, lumbering bear. He watches the swift, four-headed leopard. And finally, he witnesses a terrifying, iron-toothed empire that crushes everything in its path. These aren't just mythical nightmares. This is a meticulously precise historical map. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. The sheer, undeniable historical accuracy of Daniel's timeline is staggering to secular historians and theologians alike. But the ultimate goal of these intense visions isn't to turn us into paranoid conspiracy theorists. The ultimate objective here is profound, unshakable peace. The sickening anxiety of witnessing centuries of future warfare and dark regimes crushing the earth, overwhelming the prophet's mind. Daniel was physically exhausted by the sheer weight of what he saw. His color drained. He literally collapsed into the dirt. It is a heavy, painful thing to look closely at the broken architecture of human history. Yet the overarching message of these visions is that human history is never a series of tragic, random accidents. The sudden rise of a dictator is a temporary shadow. The catastrophic fall of an economy is a passing phase. Above the chaotic sea of nations, the Ancient of Days calmly takes his seat, and his kingdom is the only one that will never be destroyed. Transform your geopolitical anxiety into profound rest. You do not need to panic over who sits on an earthly throne when you know exactly who securely sits on the eternal one. But after all the beasts, all the visions, and all the chaos, the angel turns to this exhausted, faithful man and gives him one final, breathtakingly simple command. Part 12. How do you finish a life that was spent entirely in exile? How do you say goodbye when you lived your whole life surrounded by a culture that fundamentally hated everything you believed in? Daniel was just a teenager when he was violently dragged away from his homeland in chains. Now he is an old, frail man, approaching 90 years of age. He has outlasted King Nebuchadnezzar. He watched Belshazzar's towering empire crumble into dust in a single night. He stood completely firm through the powerful reigns of Darius and Cyrus. He has been a prime minister, a condemned prisoner, a political outcast, and an unparalleled prophet. But he never got to go home. He never saw the rebuilt walls of Jerusalem. He lived his entire beautiful life in the glittering, toxic heart of a pagan empire. And this is where modern believers often struggle the absolute most. We feel this crushing, overwhelming pressure to somehow fix the entire world. We think that if we aren't actively conquering the culture, or if our secular environment doesn't perfectly align with our spiritual values, we are somehow failing in our mission. But listen closely to the profound, quiet dignity of the angel's final words to Daniel in chapter 12, verse 13. Go your way till the end, you will rest, and then at the end of the days, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. The heavenly messenger does not hand him a sword to overthrow the government. The angel does not give him a complex political strategy to finally dismantle the Babylonian system. He simply tells him to faithfully walk his assigned path until it is time to sleep. The realization that the ultimate victory for Daniel wasn't escaping the Babylonian system, but remaining profoundly holy and untouched while living deep inside it. You do not have to fix the whole world. You do not have to win every single cultural argument on the internet. You just have to wake up, open your window, and pray. You just have to politely but firmly refuse the king's meat at your own workplace table. Your daily, quiet faithfulness is the most devastating rebellion against the darkness. It is about the lasting legacy of a quiet, unshakable trust that easily outlives the loudest, most aggressive empires of men. Your modern Babylon is loud, and the pressure to bow is everywhere. The music is playing, the lions are hungry, and the furnace is hot, so the only question left is, what legacy are you writing today?